The work of navigating officers goes on winter and summer, day and night, in calm weather and in storm. This applies equally whether engaged in passage planning, taking the watch, or entering or leaving confined waters under piloting. It is critical work, as over 80% of insured losses due to collision, grounding and contact damage are said to arise from human error. This program examines the work of the bridge team when a pilot is on board, in the context of master-pilot relationship. The master has the responsibility for the safe and efficient navigation of the ship.
Stop board engine, please. Stop board engine.
When a pilot is on board, part of this responsibility is discharged through him. The effectiveness of this arrangement will depend on the relationship between the master and the pilot. In some ports, coastal passages and controlled areas, taking a pilot is compulsory. Whether it is or not, the objective is the same: for the pilot to direct the navigation of the ship through confined and hence potentially hazardous waters during port approach, berthing and departure. The first step is to ensure that the ship is ready to receive the pilot. This means giving the pilot station an accurate ETA.
Yes, I'll be there at the pilot station half an hour from now. And which side you want the pilot, please?
It means preparing the ship for arrival and preparing the boarding arrangements for the pilot.
30 minutes. Would you rig the pilot ladder on the port side? Rig the pilot ladder on the port side, 1 meter above the water. Over.
Roger, received. Going back to channel 16 and standing by. Thank you.
Pilots estimate that between 1 in 5 and 1 in 10 ships do not provide them with the proper means of boarding. Often, the pilot doesn't complain for fear of jeopardizing his relationship with the master. Nevertheless, the resentment lingers on, souring the relationship with the entire bridge team. It is never easy boarding a ship from a small boat, and the ship should always provide a lee. The ladder and its arrangements must conform to the International Maritime Pilots Association card. The ropes must not have shackles, knots, or splices. The ladder must be the correct length. It is up to the ship to find out the height of the pilot launch to ensure this. The objective must be to make it as easy as possible for the pilot to board. There should always be a responsible officer standing by in radio communication with the bridge. The details of boarding requirements are set out in the International Maritime Pilot's Card, Required Boarding Arrangements for Pilot. These provisions must always be adhered to. A warm greeting goes a long way towards starting a good relationship.
Good evening, Captain. Good evening, Mr. Pilot. Welcome aboard. Thank you very much. Mr. Smith, my name.
Alex Mathis.
Ah. So, can you check that for me?
There are 3 areas in which pilots have an advantage over the bridge team. First, their knowledge of local traffic, current, tides, and hazards to navigation. Secondly, their greater experience and expertise in handling ships and tugs in restricted waters. Thirdly, their familiarity with and common language with the local shore-based support services, such as port authorities and vessel traffic services. All pilots will be able to provide assistance in these areas, although, like ship's officers, Their training, experience and personalities will vary. All these factors will play a part in how well they interact with the master and the bridge team. Once he has been shown the location of his life-saving equipment and been offered a cup of tea or coffee, and if it's dark, given the use of a torch, the pilot is given the pilot card. This gives him much of the information he requires on the ship, including its dimensions and the details of its engine and maneuvering characteristics. It may be that the pilot already knows some of this information from his pilotage forms or from previous voyages on the vessel. Nevertheless, the pilot card puts all the information in front of him as a reminder. Once he has checked the pilot card, he will want to know if there's any equipment that is not functioning or not up to specification. The pilot must be told the truth. Otherwise, he will assume that everything is as it should be.
Come to 232.
It is better for the master to tell him now rather than for the pilot to find out halfway through a maneuver that, for example, the bow thruster cannot deliver its full power. The pilot is a fellow professional and in the first instance merits your trust. Honesty is the best foundation for a good working relationship. In pilotage waters, margins of safety are reduced. At this most hazardous time, all too often the pilot is left on his own without anyone to assist him or monitor the ship's progress. Any master who lets this happen is failing in his responsibility for the safe navigation of his ship. He needs to make an effort to establish a good working relationship with the pilot.
Crew already, aren't they?
They are, yes.
Yeah, we'll be coming down through this deep water route here. Right.
The passage plan needs to be discussed.
Just
It's worth
around
taking a
there.
few
We'll
moments
go
for the
in
master and pilot to consider and agree the ship's intended track,
I see you picked
anticipated
out that deep water
speeds,
route. I
and
will be using
ETA.
this deep water route here, right down here. In fact, I want to parallel index on the sunk light
The
vessel
pilot
here.
may have different
Make sure we
ideas
come
based on his local knowledge.
down between these banks.
The pilot will indicate where his intended route is different from that planned by the ship.
And track at low water, so you've got plenty.
There may be language problems and cultural attitudes that make communication difficult.
That's fine.
This discussion provides a good opportunity to sort out these complications.
Done for you.
Arrangements with tugs and vessel traffic schemes also need to be agreed.
We'll come round for the start of that route.
As a result of this discussion, the master will know what is planned to happen. He and the bridge team will then be able to monitor the progress of the passage. They will also have learned how well they're able to communicate with the pilot. At the very least, they will have agreed on the common navigational terms they will need to discuss the passage.
Steadying up on 232, sir. Thank you. 232.
232. Oh, that's fine. Make it 235, please.
235, I see.
Yeah.
Is there any particular radar we would like to use, Mr. Bond? That's the one with the alpha.
Oh, yes.
The master should always offer the pilot the choice of the ship's radars and inform him how they're set up. The pilot may want one of them set up to his own specifications. Once the pilot takes over the direction of navigation, the bridge team must support him as much as possible. The presence of the pilot does not relieve the watchkeeping officer of his duties. It is important for him to be aware of the ship's situation while the pilot is navigating the ship. To quote from the relevant IMO convention, despite the duties and obligations of a pilot, his presence on board does not relieve the master or officer in charge of the watch from their duties and obligations for the safety of the ship. The master and the pilot shall exchange information regarding navigational procedures, local conditions, and ship's characteristics. The master and the officer of the watch shall cooperate closely with the pilot and maintain an accurate check on the ship's position and movements. This statement forms the basis for pilotage worldwide.
1 mile to the narrow, sir.
In some circumstances, it may be helpful to call out positions or depths or approaches to wheel over positions to the master.
Depth below keel 5 meters, sir.
In crucial situations, the pilot will need all his concentration and may not want every piece of information shouted out to him, especially if he can see it for himself. Ask him if in doubt.
What informing the pilots 8 hours in advance, that's the...
It is likely that there will be language differences. The helmsman may not be able to understand the pilot's commands. The watchkeeping officer or master may have to translate to make sure that they're properly carried out. It is possible that the master will not understand what the pilot is saying to the tugs. He should ask for a translation if he feels it necessary. If the master and pilot have agreed the passage plan, the master will be able to monitor events much more effectively. He will also notice much sooner if things start to go wrong. Every master and watchkeeping officer should ask himself, if the pilot made a mistake, would I spot it? If the pilot were suddenly to collapse, would I be able to take over?
Starboard engine turning astern.
For them to be able to do so means that they must be constantly monitoring the progress of the ship and thinking ahead. The watchkeeping officer must continue to monitor the ship's position, take fixes, instruct the lookouts, in all ways supporting the pilot. There must never be any question of leaving the pilot on his own to get on with the navigation. The pilot should welcome assistance from the bridge team, but experience will have taught him not always to expect it. Every master will have developed his own way of dealing with pilots. Pilots, similarly, will have developed their individual ways of working with masters. Both sides require tact, honesty, and mutual respect to form as quickly as possible a good working relationship.
Okay, make it 243. It's 243. 243, aye, sir.
Although there may well be language and cultural differences that interfere with this process, an honest and courteous approach works well in most cultures. If the ship is in confined and potentially hazardous waters, the master should remain on the bridge. If the watchkeeping officer believes that the ship is getting into danger due to the pilot's misjudgment, he must tell the master immediately. The master will then discuss the situation with the pilot. The master has the right to take over at any time.
Okay, we go outside, starboard side.
Such circumstances will be rare, but when they occur, the bridge team must be ready to take the appropriate action. They must know what is happening and be aware of the ship's intended track. They must have kept abreast of developments and be aware of the traffic and environmental situation around them. The watchkeeping officer must never allow a situation to develop where he's unhappy with the pilot's navigation, but can do nothing about it because he's no idea what should be happening. It is particularly important that the berthing arrangements should be fully discussed before the crucial stage of berthing begins.
We'll be coming up on the flood tide. In fact, the ship's the other way around. We'll be port side too. The moorings we'll use are 3.
The pilot needs to explain to the master the details of his berthing plan.
2 springs.
There are many issues that need to be settled.
First.
How many tugs will be needed? Where will they be
We've got 3
positioned?
tugs.
Will they use the
So
ship's
we'll
or
put
their
a
own
big
lines?
port Schneider aft.
What will be the ship's approach speed?
So I'll have the big port
Will
Schneider
anchors be
here,
used?
45 tons.
How many men are available to manage the lines?
Conventional tug that we've got.
What effect will the tide have? One particularly important issue is who will operate the thrusters? If the master intends to do this himself, he must follow the pilot's instructions and resist any inclination to superimpose his own ideas. Many difficulties have been caused by masters attempting to help by altering the thrusters without telling the pilot. Such situations can be avoided if everyone is clear about the berthing arrangements.
Bow thrusters, aye, aye.
How many horsepower you got?
It's 800, Mr. Pilot.
It's 800, oh fine, thank you.
Pilots generally take great pride in their work. They're fellow professionals who, in the great majority, need the help and deserve the respect of the bridge team. They're also fellow human beings who respond well to being treated politely. It is essential for the safety of the ship that the bridge team remember that the presence of the pilot on the bridge does not relieve them of their responsibilities. Arrangements must be made for the pilot to board safely. The task of the pilot is to navigate the ship, and the task of the bridge team is to support him and monitor the ship's passage. Honesty is the best policy in dealing with the pilot. A good master-pilot relationship is the best basis for a safe passage through busy, confined, and perhaps hazardous waters. To form such a relationship quickly requires both sides to have mutual respect and to understand each other's point of view. Such a relationship is in the best interests of both sides. Further information and advice on the subject of pilotage can be found in the Nautical Institute's publications, Pilotage and Bridge Team Management.